join us real quick before we get going? All right. Hello and welcome to PMP Live. I'm Alan Watke, a part of the events team with Politics and Prose. Thank you all for joining us today. Welcoming Ian Brennan, celebrating his new book, Music. At any point during the event, you can click on the link in the chat to purchase Music on the Politics and Prose website. You'll be able to ask Ian a question by clicking on the Q&A link, which can be found near the bottom of your screen. We will get to the audience questions towards the end of the event, and if we cannot get to all of them, we apologize if we run out of time. Along with providing ASL for this event through joyful signing, there's also the option of closed captions if you click on the CC link right next to the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Finally, we want to thank you for being here with us today. We are so thankful to our family of loyal customers keeping PMP afloat. And now I'd like to welcome back to PMP Live, Ian Brennan, celebrating the release of his new book, Music, a music manifesto in 59 notes. In 59 concise and clear points, Brennan reveals how corporate media has constricted local culture and individual creativity, leading to a lack of diversity within diversity. Music's narrative portions are driven and brought to life via the author's ongoing field recording chronicles with a wide-ranging genre of groups, such as the Sheltered Workshop Singers. Ian is a Grammy-winning music producer who has produced over 35 international records in the past decade from across 4 continents, including the countries of Rwanda, Tanzania, South Sudan, Cambodia, Romania, Pakistan, and Ghana. He is also the author of 6 previous books and has worked with the likes of filmmaker John Waters, Merle Haggard, Ramblin' Jack Elliott, Nels Klein, among others. His work with international artists such as Zomba Prison Project and the Khmer Rouge Survivors has been featured on the front page of the New York Times and on an Emmy-winning 60 Minutes segment with Anderson Cooper. Brennan was first published at the age of 19 and has contributed regularly to publications such as The Guardian, Guitar Player, Sound on Sound, Modern Drummer, and just many others. We are so excited to have him here celebrating this book. Ian will be joined in conversation with the incredible Judith Heumann, an internationally recognized leader in the disability rights independent living movement. Her work with the wide range of activist organizations, including Berkeley Center for Independent Living and the American Association of People with Disabilities, NGOs, the governments since the 70s has contributed greatly to the development of human rights legislation and policy benefiting disabled people. She has advocated for disability rights at home and abroad, serving in the Clinton and Obama administrations, and as the World Bank's first advisor on disability and development. She is the author of Being Human and Rolling Warrior. And just recently, the Washington Post came out with an article. She's considered the mother of disability rights, and she is a badass. I'm going to put the link to that in the chat. So now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Ian Brennan and Judy Heumann to PMP Live. Hello and welcome.
Hello, thank you so much. It's great to be back. Thank you for being here, Judy.
Thank you for doing this, Ian.
Oh, it's an honor.
I think this is going to be a real trip.
Yeah. I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be good. Politics and Prose is such a good store, and I wish we could be doing it in person, but very happy to be here with you.
So why don't you
Right
tell
now,
the audience where you are now?
oh yeah, I'm in Italy at the moment, so it's 1 a.m. past 1 a.m. But I'm happy to be here. So happy to be up. I don't stay up this late so much anymore, but yeah. I want to say, my sister has Down syndrome. My mother-in-law was had childhood polio. They did experiments in Rwanda on some of the village children, and so she walks with a crutch. And so on a very personal level, I want to thank you for all you've done, because it's something that really, really affects people I love and myself every day. And I think we take it for granted now. I'm sure a lot of people don't realize that what it took to make this happen, the accessibility. So thank you.
Well, I mean, I think, Ian, one of the reasons why it's interesting to have this discussion is you are living now in Italy for a while. And so it's a much older country. And laws in the US around accessibility are typically stronger than most other countries. So
Right.
what do you see around the accessibility in Italy?
Well, yeah, it's a good point. It's awful. I'm not saying everywhere awful,
Exactly.
but there's exemptions in the historic centers that are very convenient for businesses, because not only do they deny access to people that need accessibility physically, but they can deny bathrooms to everybody, in a way that they're not allowed to outside the historic centers. But again, this is something that's affected us here. We have 98 steps and no elevator.
In the building you live in?
Yes. So when my sister lived with us for 2 months, it was a challenge getting up and down. Whenever my mother-in-law comes, it's a big deal to get in and out of the building.
Mhm.
And currently we have neighbors downstairs, both who are officially classified, have the classification as disabled with the government. Therefore, they're supposed to be allowed an elevator, but it's not here. It's been years that it's been pending, because it's a historic center and a historic building, and everybody drags their feet on it, and it's tragic, So unfortunately, there are so many places here that just the accessibility is extremely limited, even getting around the cities themselves.
I mean, they have an active disability rights community in
Yes.
Italy, and they've actually done some really good work on education. And I guess for me, I'm interested in, you grew up having disability in your home because of your mom, and then it just became a natural part of who you were. How does that at all relate to music?
Well, I think it relates to music for me personally, in that that was the main connection with my sister growing up, or I should say the first connection. So I don't know that I would be a musician if it weren't for my sister. She's 14 months older than me, so we're very close in age. There was a lot of sibling rivalry, not so much reciprocated on my part, but her relationship to me was always complex. That she walked the day after I walked, so she didn't walk till she was 3 years old. But the day after I walked, she was like, "Forget this," and she did. So we have always been very close, and music was the connection. And now at this moment, she's in the hospital, and she's become disabled, unable to walk, unable to feed herself, fully incontinent for about a year now, and it's been a very rapid decline. And yet the thing that still she's connected to is music. And so from afar, I've been sending CDs to her, old CDs that she knows, and the folks that are helping her there say that she sings to these songs, and even though she's barely speaking otherwise. So music is for me, it's the best medicine, or certainly is medicinal. And there's a connection there that to me, that the community that my sister grew up in, I grew up in too, to a large degree, and their dances were the most raucous and celebratory and creative acts of dance I've ever seen. Inevitably, you know, could be 5 kids, could, you know, I'm saying kids because they were kids at the time. Could be 5, could be 20, it could be 50. Didn't matter. The party was full on every time.
This was your sister and other kids who had disabilities.
Yeah, yeah. And up until very recently, I'd go with her to dances, and even with her peers now in their 50s and 60s and, you know, 40s, and it's the same. You know, a little maybe less energy, but not much. I mean, you know, not emotionally less energy or psychologically less energy, just maybe like all of us, you know, maybe not expressing it quite as fully. But so for me, that's the connection. You said something very beautiful about music in the when we were in the green room meeting just 20 minutes ago or so. I'd love to hear that again, like talking about what music means to you.
Oh, I was saying that. So I grew up in a house also with music, and I actually studied voice for about 10 years. And music for me is emotion. And I really find that when I'm connecting to the music, that obviously I can be happy or sad, or I get this like emotional feeling, which kind of just hits me. And it's kind of like walloping me in a certain way and really bringing emotions forward that I don't on a regular basis, you know, bring forward or emote. And, you know, I knew a friend of mine who was studying voice, and I asked her if any of the songs she ever sang made her feel like emotional and ready to cry. And she had said to me, no. And I thought, how do you sing some of the songs that we sing and not get that feeling? And for me, really feeling the emotions is very important, because I think it's bringing me closer to the music and its expression. And, you know, I think in many cases what composers had to be feeling as they were, you know, creating the music. So it's very important to me. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah, the singer from Pakistan I work with, Ustad Sami, he's 77 now, and he does a 49 note microtonal system, so versus the 5 or 7 or 12 note scales that we use most in the West. But what's interesting, and I thought of this when you were talking, is that when he sings, the lyrics are secondary. You know, they're very few. It's largely trance music and cycles and changing things, improvisation throughout. And so what carries the meaning is the melody. All the meaning is put into the music itself. It's not that it's nonverbal, though a lot of it is, but the words are just a carrier for the emotion. And so, and he believes that you're, you know, by looking at the whole spectrum, you know, and embracing sonic diversity and avoiding binary equations, he believes that by doing that, that he's recovering and reclaiming what's been lost and what's been denied, and that in doing that, that he's exploring the subtlety of human emotion. And so I think that's, emotion is such an important thing. And you said that you studied voice, so what did you study? You were going to opera or what
No,
type
you
of
know, I had
voice?
polio,
Yeah.
and so it affected my breathing. So I wasn't strong enough to do operatic singing. So I really like show music and light opera and you know, I love to sing pieces from, Joan Baez and that whole crowd. And I used to sing at weddings, and I'm Jewish. And so but my teacher was a choir conductor, and he was the conductor of a choir in our neighborhood. So I went and I performed with the choir, and I would do solo work on Christmas. And
Wow.
yeah, so, and when I was a kid, I would be in plays at school and at the synagogue and at camp and many different things. But I think, ultimately it was an area that I was interested in pursuing, but, politics and disability rights activism really kind of overshadowed that. But I love going to the theater. I certainly don't do it enough. And I really think music for me is something that allows people to express their emotions. And of course, there's so much variation in music. But I really do like music which I can connect to more. I don't really connect to some music where it's very loud and I don't know. I'm not disrespectful of it, and I know people get different things out of it, but for me, I also like words that I can understand.
Yeah.
If I can't understand the words, then it's difficult for me to also make that connection.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes people make connections with pop lyrics where they've misunderstood them. So
Yeah.
they've improved them in some cases. And when they find out, or if they ever find out what the song really says, they may be disappointed. But yeah, I mean, a good lyric is poetry. I mean, it's a powerful thing.
So what drew you into music?
Well, I mean, I think with my sister, it was there, but also it goes back so far for me as being something I loved, and to the point of obsession that it's hard to, remember how that even began. I mean, I can remember points of, getting my first guitar when I was 6, or basically taking it from my brother. I guess he had one and I took it from him, more or less. And getting my first electric guitar when I was, 12, that kind of thing. But it's something that I just, I never thought about anything else or wanted to do anything else. But I'm so glad, I have to say, I'm sure you would have been an amazing singer and are an amazing singer, but I'm so glad
No, I'm not now.
No, I think so, but I'm glad that we don't need more pop singers. So I'm glad that you did what you did, because it's way more rocking and it's way more important. Yeah. So, but I'm curious, I know you said not to ask you about the best stuff, like, listing what's the best or what you like the most. But I am curious, when you're in talking about that era, particularly in the Bay Area in the 70s and 80s.
I grew up in Brooklyn, though.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah. But in the 70s and 80s, was there like a sound? I mean, were there certain songs that were like a soundtrack for the movement, when you were together, all those hours and days?
Actually, in that time, there were some songs that were beginning to be created by disabled people like Jeff Moyer and a number of Billy Ayers, a number of other people. But honestly, when I went out from Brooklyn to Berkeley, so I also like to dance. And when I would go to camp, we would have dances, and that was great. When I went to events where there were few, if any, other disabled people, dancing was something that I felt more like a spectacle. And so I've always liked to be able to be in a crowd of people where there are a reasonable number of disabled people and non-disabled people, where you're not a spectacle and where people are not oohing and eyeing that isn't it great, even when you're just dancing like anybody else and there's really nothing special about it, and don't want to be called out for just doing something that if I wasn't in a wheelchair, nobody would be oohing and eyeing about. But the music that was great to dance to were Motown songs, because they have a great melody and steps where you could do them. I could do them with friends and teach friends, how to dance with me. And that also has been a lot of fun. And I think it's, when you talk to disabled people that are part of like organizations, groups like the National Council on Independent Living and AUCD, Association for University Centers on Disability, they'll always have a big dance at the end, pre-COVID. And it was amazing. Ian, I think, if your sister was there, or if you saw or were part of it, you'd see, just like you were discussing with your sister in music, it is great to be able to see people who maybe in their head for years wanted to dance, but didn't live in a community either where dancing was something that was accessible to them, or they, like I was expressing, felt inhibited because of the way people would have talked about it, and including in some cases where family members might say, oh, no, don't do that, because it could be quote unquote, excuse me, embarrassing.
Yeah.
But I think music and dancing for everybody is so very important. And in the area of disability, one of the reasons why I think, music and dancing is so important is because it really, in my case, and I know in the case of many of my friends, made us feel freer, made us feel like we were making a statement. And by being with more people, we weren't giving people permission to ooh and ah and to talk about us as being exceptional or inspirational. Now, there's some people that are great dancers. Ali Stroker, I don't know if you know Ali, but she's a wheelchair user. She's the first disabled woman to perform on Broadway. She was in Oklahoma, and she is an actress, a singer, a dancer in her wheelchair. And it's kind of funny because she went to Tisch at NYU in New York City, and she was studying theater. And when she went to her dance class, the instructor first told her that she could take the notes for the class. But she, of course, being who she is, did not. I think the eye is like, why in the world did that happen?
Yeah.
Exactly. But she very much in her own way really made it very clear that she didn't sign up for a dancing class so that she could be the note taker.
Yeah.
And you can see it in the production that she's in. And I think also when people like Ali and others are performing in a very public way, I think it's so very important that people are getting messages of high quality. Ali uses a wheelchair, and her performances are excellent because she studies hard, she's got talent, and they're not better or worse because she uses a wheelchair. She uses her wheelchair in a way that is a part of who she is. Yeah. And I think that's being accepted more and more. But I think, for the audience, really, we're not yet at a point where we just accept disabled individuals, regardless of our disabilities, doing things that other people do. We so frequently, because we're not seeing people, when we see it, it's like in some ways shocking. I think younger people are learning differently because there is more inclusion going on. But I think music is such a fundamental part of all of our lives, and how we relate to music through singing, through thought, through dancing, through writing, meditation, whatever it may be. I think making sure that people, regardless of the type of disability, have those same experiences is really important, or given the opportunity to have those experiences.
Yeah. You know, you reminded me when you were talking about that when I was a teenager, late teenager, early 20s, I worked at a facility in the East Bay. It was kind of a transition. It was a residential facility with developmentally delayed adults. And they did a dance every Friday night. And they'd had the same band come in there for years, and they were a cover band. And so I suggested that we start bringing in the local bands, you know, that were playing in the clubs that people would go out to see. And so I booked different bands to come in every Friday, and almost invariably at the end, they would say, this is the best. These are bands that were touring all over the country, sometimes all over the world. And they would say, this is the best audience we've ever performed for, you know. And again, it could be 20 people some nights, it could be 50 other nights, but there was such a commitment to the music, and also such a openness to, because these were diverse artists, you know. These are people that were playing hip hop, or that were playing metal, or that were you know, I mean, and it, you know, I mean, obviously some bands were a bigger hit than others, but they were all a hit, you know. And but over and over again, they would say, this is the best gig, we got to come, you know. And they would come back sometimes too and do it, you know, another time, you know, a few months later. But I'd forgotten that. I wasn't even thinking about that till some of what you were saying.
Can I just say for a second?
Yeah.
Alan, the captioning has stopped. Can you see it, Jenny? Is it working?
I can also see it.
But it's not working. Is it working for you? It is working for you, Jenny? Oh, mine froze. Okay, let's keep going then.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you for checking on that. I had one question, just when you were talking about Allie, you said she was the first person on Broadway. When was that? What year approximately?
Some, I don't know, 2017, 2018.
Oh, okay. Pretty
2016.
recently. Yeah.
Yeah, she got her award. This is 20, God, years. This is 21, not 20. I think it was 19, 18 or 19.
Okay, yeah, because when you said Oklahoma, I thought, oh wow, maybe this was.
No, it's revision.
Yeah.
And it was quite a revision.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. Well, you know, I read your paper. I think that you did when you were with the Obama administration about media and.
No, actually, I was a fellow at the Ford Foundation.
Ford Foundation.
Yeah, and I did the paper with two colleagues.
Amazing paper. Yeah.
Thank you.
And talking about you know, there've been, I think now the number is 67 non-disabled actors nominated for playing disabled roles. And one of the great points you made was that almost half of them have won. And you said, well, this system is working for them. You know, like the you know, it's working quite well, isn't it? So I'd mentioned to you about this film that I by chance saw a couple of weeks ago at the Venice Film Festival, and I'm trying to tell everybody that I can about it, you know. And it's
a Finnish film, right?
Yeah, it's a Finnish film. It's such a great film, meaning it's a great film, aside from anything socially. And it's called The Blind Man Who Did Not Want to See Titanic, and it's 82 minutes long. It has one character on screen the entire time, and it's someone who is in a wheelchair, uses a wheelchair, is blind and has MS, and that's the character in the movie, and that's also who he is. And his friend wrote the movie for his friend, and Petri, who plays the part. And I talked to the director and I asked him, so, did you consider, like this history of things like Rain Man and were there positive and negative models? And he said, no. He said, I just tried to write a really good love story. And that's all I was focused on. And I think that's
how people can see the film?
I think at this moment, it's very hard to see the film,
right.
And very few people have. But I sometimes am delusional about these things, overly romantic, but I have this vision that it's going to blow up and be huge and, get Oscar nominations for foreign film and Oscar nomination for Petri. And he'll be the first physically disabled actor ever to get an Oscar nomination. That's what I think should happen. It should happen. I mean, his performance is incredible. Because
what's the name of it again?
The Blind Man Who Did Not Want to See Titanic, which itself is a great title. So it's a great film. And I don't know historically if there's other films. I know you said not to ask about the best, but are there others that you think people should see, or that you?
I think people should see Crip Camp.
Oh yeah, there you go. I think so too. Yeah, which should have won the Oscar, by the way. It was great that it was nominated. Should have won, but
well, it was great that it was nominated, and I think we wish everybody well. And I think the other 3 films that were nominated were also really good films.
Oh yeah. It's usually a very strong category. Yeah.
Yes, it was. So The Blind Man, one more time.
The Blind Man Who Did Not Want to See Titanic.
Okay.
And it won the audience award. It's a new award that they have at the Venice Film Festival, and it won, which I thought was really, it made me feel that I wasn't off in my sense of it, because it sounds on paper to some people probably like it would be difficult, like an art film that's hard to watch and slow, and it's not. I mean, it was, out of all the films at the festival, this is the film that people they enjoyed, and it's largely because the lead performance, he's so funny and so charismatic, and
the Crip Camp also at Sundance was the audience selection.
Oh, there you go. That's great.
There are many other films out there, obviously. What I like about these types of films is, or some of them, is that they're documentaries. And so in the case of Crip Camp, I think one of the reasons why so many people like it is, whether you have a disability or not, people are learning about things they didn't know about. And my husband and I last night were going to a comedy show where the opening act was a disabled man named Nick Novicki. And I think people should look him up, because he's also doing Novicki. He's doing some really great work with disabled artists. They do film competitions every year where a category is put out and people have to do put their piece together over a weekend. And I was meeting with him today and really finding some very talented people, because one of the issues is the paper that you were referring to is A Roadmap to Inclusion, Changing the Voice of Disability in Media. And as you were saying, one of the big issues is, and this paper came out in 2018, but one of the big issues is lack of representation from disabled people, i.e. non-disabled people, getting awards for playing a disabled character. And likewise, disabled people being given limited opportunities to be able to really learn the professions. And now, we're talking about in the writer's room, behind and in front of the camera, and just being able to play, as you were saying, the man who I wrote this film, wanted it to be a story that people could relate to. And I think that's what we see in Crip Camp is people continually saying, as this gentleman said to me as we walked to the hall, how come I didn't know anything about this? I knew all these things about what was going on in the 1960s and 1970s, and I knew nothing about this.
Right.
What I think is really important about that, and Politics and Prose has really been great about this because they have such fantastic selection of books. And so if you're wanting to learn more about disabled writers who, are writing in every style you want, they can help you find those books. And same in the theater and in music as well as, like, there are a number of emerging singers and performers, Lachi being one of them, who's a woman who's legally blind, becoming blind, who's an amazing singer and doing some really fantastic work. But now what we want to make sure of is that as people are gaining great qualifications, that they're producing work which will be shown. And I think that really also depends on the audiences, and audiences demanding that there be better representation from disabled people.
Yes. Yeah. Well, with music, the point you're making, I've seen a lot, and with the Grammys, there's been a lack of inclusion of artists regionally throughout the world in different languages. Almost 80% of African countries have still never had an artist nominated. But with the disabled community, it's very similar, meaning that no pop artist with a physical disability has ever won a Lifetime Achievement Award, for instance. And then great artists like Vic Chestnut, who for me is one of my favorite songwriters of all time. I think he's probably the best post-Dylan, certainly one of the best post-Dylan folk writers. And he produced 19 records in 18 years, and he never even got nominated. And he was not great because he was in a wheelchair. He was just great. He was just amazing and singular. And this was just an additional element. And Staff Benda-Billy, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're from the Congo, from Kinshasa, and many people have to make their own wheelchairs out of I'm sure you've seen this with your travels and with the World Bank, and they make their own instruments as well as their own wheelchairs. And they were one of their records were good, but when I saw them live, that was one of the best concerts I've ever seen. Like so many bands that, the live show is better than the records, or the records better than the live show. In their case, the live show was just incredible. And again, I mean, I can't think of I can only think of a handful of bands, global bands, international bands in the last 20 years that were as significant as they were, and they never got a nomination. So I think, there absolutely needs to be more inclusion, and there absolutely is a lack, and it's not for lack of talent. It's not for lack of individuals, though there should be support to have even more.
I mean, as you were saying, there's never been anyone from Africa nominated for a Grammy. And I think it's very similar. So disabled individuals from Africa, from Latin America, from Asia, from, North America, there are biases in so many categories. And even the fact that we're having a discussion like this, I think is so very important. The thing about disability is, as it cuts across every group. And so, as we are seeing more disabled people in performing, writing, etc., we are also seeing greater diversity by disability and race and gender, all of which is important. I'm 73 years old, so I'm a little bit old school, I guess, but I when I watch TV, I do look at advertisements, not the ones that are selling medicine, but outside of that, I look at all of them. And the change that has gone on in my lifetime on who is selling a product is phenomenal. The racial diversity, sexual orientation diversity, on and on. But when it comes to disability, it's a little bit better, but not anywhere near where advertising overall has moved. And I think it's very important because we need to see us as a part of the mix, right? So we need to be able to see Black and brown and indigenous, on and on, people who have all kinds of disabilities. And I think, one of the other issues is that the majority of people with disability, or a significant number, have invisible disabilities.
Yeah.
Depression, anxiety, bipolar, lupus, whatever it may be, diabetes, whatever. And we want those people to feel like they can come out.
Right.
And I think that is slowly happening, where you're seeing more people, Selma Blair coming out with her MS and other people. I think that's really important. It's important for them to be able to come out of the closet and express themselves in a way that kind of takes on the industry, so that as professionals in the field, they can come forward and talk about how, not only how their disability is impacting them, but as they can continue to stay in their profession, also being able to talk about that and bringing that additional part of who they are, into the work that they're doing.
Yeah.
So I just think it enriches us as a world, as a globe. As you were saying, when you go to many countries around the world, particularly those countries that are poorer, people are making their own wheelchairs and instruments. Now, an organization started in Oakland, California, called Whirlwind Wheelchairs. And it started in the 70s by a guy named Ralph Hotchkiss, who went to Oberlin, and he was driving a motorcycle and he hit a pebble. And when he hit the pebble, he became a high paraplegic. And he was an engineer. And so what he did with other friends was to start a wheelchair project where people make their own wheelchairs in their country out of material from within the country. And then, they're training disabled people for jobs, and they're making wheelchairs which are durable, so that in fact people can use them, because many chairs made in the US, in some of the countries you've been discussing, they will last about 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And then they break. So
Yeah.
Alan, just to tell you that everything on my screen has frozen, so I can't see any questions in the Q&A or chat, if there are any.
Yeah, there's 2 questions in the Q&A coming up. There's nothing so far in the chat itself, but I have a question for you before we get to those. I just wanted to say a couple of things that to quote you, but that I found really among all the brilliant things you say. But one of them is that we need to put the D in diversity, which is disability. I think that's, so much. I mean, it's such a beautiful articulation of a lot of what you're talking about. And also the idea that I've heard you write and say more than once, that it's the world that has it wrong, because disability is a normal part of life, and that people experience it at different stages, and more than 1 in 4 people will experience it directly at some point in their life. And the film, The Blind Man Who Did Not Want to See Titanic, I think is an example of this, that the star is someone who was, was not always in a wheelchair and was not always blind. This is, so when he became friends with the director, it was, prior to this, they've known each other for decades. And so, this is something that is now part of his life, like you said, an additional part of his life, but his whole relationship with the director goes back, before that, so and that's, again, I think the director and he had this relationship where they focused on the person, and that was so important. But my question is this.
Sorry, guys, 1 second.
Yeah, no problem.
People
I'll
are-
get to, yeah.
People are coming home.
Oh, I see.
I want to also say that just say disability, just use the word. I think that was originally coined by a great guy who lives in Berkeley named Lawrence Carter Long, who's just really been one of the, I think where many of us are saying that, including myself, but I want to give him credit because he's such a great person around language. Language is his thing. This is my friend.
Hello.
Okay, this is Theodore. You want to come on quickly and say hello to people? Okay.
Theodore. Hey. How's it going there? Hello. Hi. Good to see you. So,
Sorry.
no, not at all. That was beautiful. So the just say it. Can you elaborate on that? I think I understand, but just so
I think, one of the issues is the word disabled and disability is a word that more and more disabled people are using. It's a term that defines who we are. It's a political word. It enables us to come together in order to look at issues that are important to us. And sorry.
I'm gonna look at, it looks like we've got a couple of questions here, so we can start to look at those, because I know we're getting to that point anyway. Yeah, and there's 2 of them here, so we can talk about that in a moment. Yeah, so just being direct about it and using the word and not being afraid to
Because
use the
people
word.
make up all these other words.
Yeah.
They use the word disabled. They cross out the dis. They capitalize the A. They talk about the able disabled. I hate the word able. Everybody's got abilities. Why is the world being told that if you have a disability, you don't have a disability, you are able? I am able. I come into a room, I don't presume that everybody there is going to be a scientist or that everybody there is going to be a mathematician, but I assume that everybody in the room have things that have things they can contribute, right? And in the area of disability, it's not disabled people that are saying capitalize the A. It's non-disabled people that feel uncomfortable. I mean, I was on the Trevor Noah show a couple of years ago, and I think he's an amazing man. And we were having a little discussion where he used the word able-bodied, and I said, I don't like the word able-bodied because, as you were saying a few minutes ago, statistically speaking, people are going to acquire a permanent or temporary disability over the course of their life. And so I said that to him, and he said, are you threatening me? And I really so resonated to that word, because I think it is completely what many non-disabled people think about when they think about disability. They think, how could I live my life? And oh my goodness, what people are doing is so exceptional, inspirational. I think it's really less about what the person is doing and more about their fear that they wouldn't know how to handle their disability. So, one of the things that we're also talking about is, as you said, disability is a normal part of life and you need to plan for it. People think about their finances when they're going to get older, whether or not they do anything about it, they think about it. they may be scared, whatever, but they think about it. If one thinks about the fact that you could acquire various forms of disabilities, it could really have a very positive impact on your future, my future, and the 60 million Americans and 1 billion disabled people around the world. So, for example, making sure that all housing that was constructed was accessible, making sure that we, as a part of our national government and state and local communities, have good home and community-based services. So people don't wind up having to live in nursing homes or in segregated living environments. And I know that one of the issues with your sister is that she was getting poor services.
Yeah.
And I think that's partially due to our country not really recognizing what good support services should be. And they think about it as for someone else. And when you see, like with your sister, when there's a problem going on, it's both very painful and you want to correct it. But if non-disabled people now were really engaged, then these kinds of problems would happen less and less.
Yeah.
And so I think really disability, like aging, is a community most people want to join, right? You want to become older, and you shouldn't feel like you're a burden and have to take yourself out of society. We are working more and more on creating the ability for people to live in their homes and not to go to institutions, but there's much more that needs to be done. I mean, right now, the Biden administration has, in the proposed legislation, $400 billion for home and community-based services. It's likely going to be reduced, but we're fighting for keeping it at least at $250 billion, because that would be a major jump.
Yeah. Well, let's hope that does happen. Let's hope that does happen. Thank you so much. So we got a couple of questions. We've touched on the first one a bit, which are, who are some of your favorite musicians with disabilities? So I talked about Vic Chestnut and Staff Benda Balili. I don't know if there's anybody, you mentioned some individuals earlier.
Latchi, I was saying, Latchi's great. I
Yeah.
think you should all go listen to her music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, the thought came to me when you were talking too about, you know, how it's
And
part of,
Galen,
yeah, it's amazing.
Galen's great.
She is.
She's
She's
fantastic.
incredible. Yeah. She can be very transcendent.
And I think she won the Tiny Desk Award from National Public Radio a couple of years ago.
Right. Yeah.
She's
She's a
great.
huge success on that. Yeah. And when you were talking about musicians, it got me thinking that you know, 3 of the most influential guitar players of all time are people that don't have a full left hand of fingers. So Tommy Iommi from Black Sabbath, who basically, you know, invented heavy metal. He's missing his middle finger, I believe it is. Jerry Garcia, Grateful Dead, missing his middle finger. And then Django Reinhardt, who is really the grandfather, other than Charlie Christensen, is the grandfather of all electric guitar playing. You know, after a fire, was left with two fingers to play with, and he plays amazingly and amazingly fast and amazingly influential. So it's very much a part of the history. I mean, the 3 massively influential individuals.
See, that's the next documentary.
Yeah.
Seriously.
It would be a good one. It would be a good one. It's true.
And interviewing those that are still alive and asking them about their journey and others, that would be amazing.
Yeah. And when you talk about, you know, how it's something that's likely to happen to all of us and we should plan for it, in the case of Tony from Black Sabbath, what I read is that it was his last day on the job. He worked in a foundry, and it was his last day on the job before he was going to become a professional musician, and he lost his finger, you know, and yet that was the beginning of his professional career, and he went on. So it says, can you talk a little bit about how corporate media has led to a lack of diversity within diversity? Well, I think the clearest way to talk about that, whether we're talking about diversity with the capital D or not, is just that right now with streaming, 90% of the streaming activity, 1% of the artists receive 90% of that activity. And we know who those people are. So no matter what they look like, it's a very small percentage of people in the world. The figure was 40,000 songs a day being uploaded to Spotify daily. Now it's the most recent figure I've heard is 62,000 songs a day. And the same survey found that 20% of them are never listened to one time. So it's the illusion of a meritocracy, and it's the illusion of inclusiveness, the possibility versus the probability that we're competing against. And when you only have 3 corporations controlling over 76% of the recorded music in the world, you know that you're not going to be hearing music from everyone and for the right reasons. And they've centralized power to a degree that you're going to hear who they want you to hear, and you do hear who they want you to hear. You don't walk into, unless it's an independent coffee shop in DC or somewhere, you're not going to walk into a coffee shop and hear Galen or hear Vic Chestnut or hear Steph Bendabalili or a lot of the greatest music on the planet. You're going to hear those same 1% that are getting 90% of the streaming activity. And those 3 companies used to be 6, and everybody was very concerned when it went from 7 to 6. I remember this in the late 80s, early 90s. Well, I mean, that trend is easy to follow. It's soon going to be 2, and eventually it will be probably 1, and that's Universal Music, aptly named. So I think that's a way that corporate media has led to a lack of diversity. Also with the deregulation, where you instead of being only able to own 1 radio station in a market, you can own more than one, and the cross collateralization between the billboards, the people who own the billboards and own the venues and own the record companies and own the radio stations, it centralizes thing. And diversity is good for us. It's good for us nutritionally. It's good for us genetically. It's good for us neurologically. We need it, and without it, we're not healthy. We're not as healthy as we would be. So, anything you want to add, Judy? I think we're almost out of time.
I'm so happy that I got asked to be on this show with you.
Oh no, I'm so happy. I'm so happy.
I think it speaks a lot to you, Ian.
Oh,
that you think very much out of the box.
Oh wow!
Seriously.
Well, thank you. I'm touched. No, I could talk to you all day long, all night long. It's night. It's 2 a.m. But hopefully we'll get to talk again, and hopefully we'll get to meet in person, and hopefully we'll be able to do more. Yeah, I would love it too. Oh, and I was going to say that I really believe this, that the books are always about that. If you're given 2 choices that are more or less equal in quality, it's not charity. If you're given 2 records that are more or less equal, buy the one or choose the one or devote it to the one that's less represented. And so with book events, I really believe in this, that before you buy any of my books, please buy a book or consider buying a book by someone who's less represented, whoever that might be. I mean this very much so. So I would say, please buy one of Judy's books first, and they are worthy. So I have Rolling Warrior
Rolling
here with
Warrior
me.
is for young adults.
It's for young adults, but it's
and
a good book.
Being Human is the adult.
Being Human is for the adults. So buy both of them. Another book I might recommend, just because I have it at hand, is Witches, Witch Hunting, and Women by Sylvia Federici, who has another new book out. And we did a nice book event with her, also with Politics and Prose earlier this year, but just a brilliant individual and readable, similar to the blind man who did not want to see Titanic. This is, something that is unexpectedly readable, like so many academic books are. So please buy a book, but not necessarily my book, but buy a book from Politics and Prose, not from Amazon, and buy it ideally from someone who otherwise is not represented as often in media. And then if you want to, somewhere down the line, maybe buy one of my books too.
You should buy one of his books. If you're on this show, you should definitely buy one of his books. Okay. But I also want to say that my books are out on audio, and Ellie Stroker read both of my books, and my books are also out in large print.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you so much, and thank you, Alan, Politics and Prose, and thank you, Jenny, for helping us here.
Definitely. Thank you all. Thank you so much. I did try and keep up and put links to everything in the chat. So while I give this little wrap up and thank you, there's a link to find out more about the blind man who did not want to see the Titanic. Cripcamp.com is there. There's a link to it. For Say the Word, there's a link to that to find out more. A little thing on Vic Chestnut. Galen's Tiny Desk link is there. I tried it. What y'all were hitting on is just beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm so happy. Like, this conversation was just is what we wanted, you know, to bring to the Politics and Prose community. So there's.
Let me just say, Alan, also, as I mentioned, my everything froze. So if you can cut and paste what you put up and send it to me as an email, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely, I will. Yeah. I have it all there. So I'll make sure I send that to you, Judy. Thank you. But yeah, I think I think that's about it. Thank you. The conversation was beautiful. I can't wait to see what both of you all put out next.
Oh,
you
thank
know,
you.
whether it's books or documentaries or any of that. I know every time you're just gonna nail it. So I appreciate you both so much.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, with that, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe and stay well read.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny.